At this point in time, I would really love for everyone to join me in welcoming to our virtual podium, Carson Lambeth, for our Special Improvement Districts 101 session. Carson's career has included over 17 years of experience with project and relationship management, human resources, and recruiting. She specializes in consensus building and successful program implementation. Carson has also been involved with many nonprofit organizations in the Sacramento community, including St. Hope, March of Dimes, Breakthrough, and the Child Abuse Prevention Council. Carson earned a bachelor's degree from UC Davis in organizational studies and a minor in rhetoric and communications. And she joins us today from her offices with Civitas Advisors in Sacramento, California. So welcome, Carson.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Alicia. What a kind introduction. I'm hoping today to talk to everyone a little bit about some of the developments that we've seen for business improvement districts, both property-based and business-based. And so I wanted to start off today with talking a little bit about the evolution of business and property assessments. So business and property assessment districts, the concept first started with the agricultural industry, which used the assessment funding model to market groups of businesses with a common interest. How many of you have heard about the Got Milk campaign? I'm sure that sounds familiar to some of you. It was a great example of where businesses with a common interest came together, assessed themselves to market their product. We then moved to the 1960s, where property owners started to discover these assessment districts. The first property business improvement district was founded in Sacramento when a group of property owners came together, and they'd seen these property-based districts in other states, and they wanted to develop that for California. So they actually got together. They had someone write the Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994. Maybe somebody that you might know in Civitas was responsible for leading that charge. John Lambeth actually wrote the legislation, and it was passed, and now we have the first property business improvement district in Sacramento, which was the Sacramento Downtown Partnership. We then moved to the 1990s, where lodging owners started to discover assessment districts. The first tourism improvement district was formed, and they assess hotels primarily, and then they use those funds to market their destination to put more heads in beds. As we moved on into the 2000s, we started to hear some other unique ideas for business assessment districts. One, I will mention, I saw that Carlsbad was on the line. Carlsbad formed the first golf improvement district. It actually is where a group of golf courses came together, and they decided to assess themselves to market Carlsbad as a golfing destination. We've also seen other industry-specific growth tourism or business improvement districts with restaurant business improvement districts. We've had a lot of interest in wine marketing districts, and now we have over 111 tourism improvement districts in California. So it's taken off. So the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the developments that we've seen in property-based districts and business-based districts. Owners associations are managing multiple districts, and this is interesting because they're able to use the economies of scale, and when they are managing more than one district, they're able to pool their resources. So there's lots of example where property-based districts are also managing their business improvement district that may overlay or have similar boundaries to the PBid. We also have seen where there's owners associations that are managing more than one PBid. So they are able to, capitalize on their staffing and with vendors and be able to have multiple contracts within those districts. The Midtown Business Partnership, the Midtown Partnership is actually a great example as well. They have two property business improvement districts, as well as they have a restaurant business improvement district that overlays both of the PBids. So we're seeing that more and more, and I think we're going to see that even more in the future. The next thing I wanted to talk a little bit about is how both property-based districts and business-based districts have really assisted and helped their business owners and property owners during the pandemic. We saw a lot of participation from owner associations reaching out to the city or to the county and participating in grant programs where they actually were able to give grants to some of their business owners to help them keep the lights on. We also saw a lot of assistance in advocating for their districts, where the owners associations came in, helped assist getting streets closed, maybe even paying for tents for the people that are within the district so that they can provide for outside dining. And, even sometimes just closing the roads so that retail can go out on the sidewalk and make it a friendly outside experience for folks during the pandemic, and give them the ability to still be able to sell their goods. The other thing we saw also was the tourism improvement districts really focus on marketing to drive markets to bring visitors to their destinations. Since people weren't flying, the way that they were able to help their businesses was to market to local folks within 2 or 3 hours, and try to encourage them to take a day trip to a rural destination or someplace that had a lot of outside activities, and try to help, again, bring business to the area. Another thing we noticed during the pandemic was that both property-based district and business-based districts did better if they had some reserves. And so I think this was a lesson learned for a lot of folks, is that they decided, and we've heard a lot of people ask us about this, that they want to increase their reserves going forward. It is always a great recommendation to at least have 3 to 4 months of reserves if possible. I know, as Gomara just mentioned, a lot of people's budgets are fairly small, but if you can somehow put a little bit away so that if you do have something that comes up or there's a lapse in funding, that you are able to at least have some resources. We also have seen a lot of sustainability programs. I don't know if any of you guys have heard, or if you have this situation in your own destination, but a lot of the locals don't want more visitors. They don't want more people coming. They can't get into their favorite restaurants. They can't get into their favorite attractions. Or they feel like people are hurting their natural resources. So we have actually seen a lot of funding for tourism sustainability programs in areas such as Monterey, Sonoma, and Anaheim. And there may be others. And if you guys have a sustainability program, please share that with us today, because that's, I think, another trend we're going to see in the future. Something else that we have seen, starting in 1999, there was only one district out there, one assessment district out there that had multiple lines of business, and that was Visit California. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Visit California, but they actually are the only statewide assessment district. And what they do is they actually assess car rentals, hotels, restaurants, and anything else, attractions, anything else that's tourism related. And so they actually raise over $100 million a year to market California. I'm sure some of you have seen the Visit California commercials. They actually are wonderful, and they actually will work with different destinations and provide assistance to them financially, or they will group destinations together to assist them financially to market their destination. Mammoth Lakes in 2013 was another business improvement district that is now assesses multiple lines of business. They assess lodging, retail, restaurants, the ski slope, ski classes. They actually are have been very successful and have been around since the 2013. And just recently, we have a third district that has done a similar thing with assessing lodging, retail, restaurants, and attractions, and that's North Lake Tahoe. Just to kind of give you an idea, though, these are not always easy to assess multiple lines of business like this. As you all know, assessment districts have to benefit those that pay. And so the more different types of businesses that you have, it's a little bit harder to show that direct benefit. It took North Lake Tahoe over 3 years to complete the project, and they also hired an outside marketing firm to help them, reach out to stakeholders. So I think it's worth noting that they've had some success. They just started. Mammoth has had a lot of success, and obviously Visit California has as well. Next slide, Alicia. Some of the first of their kind districts that we've seen recently, we had the first wine marketing district form in Temecula, and they are raising over 1.2 million to market 51 wineries in their region. And we expect to see more of these. It is a little more challenging because you have both tasting rooms and growers. And so with Temecula, they just focused on the tasting rooms, but we expect to see more of these in the future, and are currently working with Livermore, and they are in their final stages of getting their wine marketing district approved. I mentioned earlier the restaurant business improvement districts. We have 5 now in California, and expect to see more of those as well. And basically, these restaurants are just coming together in a geographical area, and they are marketing their destination with different events and different, restaurant weeks and things like that to bring visitors to their restaurants. Transportation districts. We saw the first one formed in Squaw Valley in 2019. I don't know how many of you have been to Squaw Valley, but they had a challenge of taking visitors from the condos, from their short-term rental, or from their hotel to the ski slopes. And in the difficult weather, it wasn't easy having cars going back and forth on that road. So the property owners and business owners in the area decided, hey, we want to do a free shuttle. And this was incredibly, incredibly popular. And as you can see, the first 3 months, they saw over 50,000 riders on the Mountaineer, which is their free rideshare service. We've also seen more infrastructure districts where business assessment districts are used for expansion and remodel of convention centers. This has been used in San Francisco for Moscone Center, and Visit Sacramento just recently added another tourism improvement district. So they actually have 2 tourism improvement districts. The second was used for the convention center expansion, and they believe it's going to allow them to have bigger conferences and probably get an extra 260,000 room nights annually to their destination. Placer County did the first sports focused district. I don't know how many of you guys have kids who are in competitive sports, but I have, and it never seemed that they played in the same city. It was always at least 2 or 3 hours away. And so this is a brilliant idea to bring people to your community. Usually when they have a tournament, they're there for 2 or 3 days. They'll have, over 100 families, but Placer County has been successful in that, and we expect to see more of those as well. Next slide, Alicia. So some of the predictions we have for the next 10 years is we expect to see cannabis districts. We've had some interest in this, and it's where legalized marijuana growers, or not growers, but shops want to market their shops and also discourage people from using other sources to find cannabis. And so we really think this is going to be something that catches on. Again, it might be difficult because there is some political aspect to this. And so we might have some pushback from certain cities, but you never know. We might see that first cannabis district in the next 5 to 10 years. Beer marketing districts. We have cities right now that have multiple breweries, and how they are marketing them is they're talking about a beer trail. And so this is something that where they could assess themselves and maybe pass it along to the customer, and then use those marketing funds to market their beer trail and bring more visitors to their destination. We think we're going to see more attraction districts, and as I mentioned before, more wine and restaurant districts. And then we expect to see tourism improvement districts use their assessment funds to expand their convention centers and create convention centers and sport complexes. Next slide. So some things to consider before you embark on any of these different districts, and it could be any different district, but I think the most important thing that you want to think about when you are forming a district, and I think any of you that have been out there and done the work, is stakeholder support. At Civitas, we like to say the 4 Ps are the way to get you there with stakeholder support. And the 4 Ps are a personal presentation from a persuasive peer. Property owners or business owners can hear from consultants, they can hear from your owners association, they can also hear from the city, but the most persuasive argument is always going to be from their peers that can tell them why they think this is going to be good for them. And it's always good to have some key stakeholder support before you embark on a formation process for either a property-based district or a business improvement district. Another thing to consider is time to form. I mentioned North Lake Tahoe took 3 years. That's not the typical amount of time, but it can be. I would say on average, though, for a business improvement district, it will take anywhere from 8 to 12 months. And then for a property business improvement district, I think it usually will take 10 to 14 months. 10 months is pretty quick, but we have seen it done before. Cost is going to vary. It will vary from the size of your district, how many parcels you have, how many businesses you have, how much involvement you want from the consultant. But I would say on average, you'd be looking somewhere between $45,000 to $70,000 to form a district. As an owners association, I just wanted to mention that you would be taking on, so right now you don't have to comply with some of these laws. You would have to, as a new owners association, if you're using the Property and Business Improvement District Law of 1994, you must make sure that your assessments are benefiting the payers. And so our recommendation for you would be to, if you have other funding, is to make sure that you keep the funding for your assessments separate from your other funding, like if you have membership money or if you're doing events and you have money. So you'd want to keep those separate and be able to account for those separately. Because as we mentioned before, assessment districts have to benefit those that pay. The other thing to take into consideration if you form a new owners association or have an existing owners association and use the 1994 law is that you will need to comply with Brown Act and the Public Records Act. So those are 2 things that you'll want to make sure that yourself and your boards are familiar with when you embark on this. And last but not least, one of the other top things to think about as a owners association with a district, a business improvement district, is that you'll need to do an annual report each year before City Council or the County Board of Supervisors and provide them with not only what has happened, but really forward-looking as well, so that for the next year's budget, what you'll be spending it on, what amounts will be spent on in the next year budget, what's for those services, and just providing them with that information. And that needs to be approved each year by City Council or the County Board of Supervisors. So that is my presentation. I wanted to leave plenty of time for questions. And so does anyone have any questions for me?
Thank you so much, Carson. Really good information. That was one of the top topics that we had heard from our members from our network. What is the special improvement district thing? How does it work? And how can we find out more about it? We do have some questions that came in through the registration. So if you just give me one moment, I can pull those up real quickly. But if anyone has those as well, please feel free to jump in.
Could I actually, Carson, if you can hear me, this is Christine Davis. I'm in Carlsbad.
Hi, Christine.
Hi, we do have, with our visitors center, we have a tourism, a very strong T-bid. And as you mentioned, we have our golf bid. The city of Carlsbad, I have a meeting next week, are very interested in us pursuing a bid or a P-bid.
Oh, great.
Leaning towards a P-bid. I got my job as a result of a failed P-bid attempt. I went from a board member to a part-time program manager to a full-time executive director, sold my own store, and now have a second employee. So it was because the P-bid did not go through and there was nobody available to take over the MainStreet. So I jumped in. So I find it quite ironic that 6.5, almost 7 years later, they are now approaching me to become a PBid. I'm curious to know, and this might be something for Amanda and team, how many Main Streets have gone the route of not being one and then moving towards it. I know Gumaro, for example, in Oceanside, I think for many, many years you were not, and I could be incorrect, but I think you're now a PBid, not a bid. Is there a way to find out how many in California are bids versus PBids? And just to get some personal information from them, if they did it again, would they do it again? Would they go a different route?
I don't have all of the, numbers on how many. I can certainly, look through some of the membership that we have to ascertain that information. But I know that there are a good number of our programs that are PBids, and I in Richmond worked with Civitas to establish a PBid in 2012, and it was renewed in 2017. I believe is up for a renewal again next year. We had formerly been funded mostly by the redevelopment agency, which was eliminated. And before that happened, we decided that, we really wanted to figure out a way to keep our program going. And the PBid model was something that really worked in terms of us being able to get the funding to keep programming going in downtown Richmond. So I know that it is a model and a tool that really works for Main Streets. It helps if you have a Main Street program that's already established, and you've already done a good number of, amount of stakeholder engagement, as Carson talked about, because it's really important to have them at the table. And it's not always, the answer, but it has worked for a number of our programs. Carson, I don't know if you had any other information specifically.
I didn't know if Gomaro wanted to jump in, but yes, we've definitely seen a lot of business-based districts decide to take on trying to do a property-based district. The main reason, because you can really assess a property owner much more than you can a business owner. The other reason that we see this happen is because businesses are so transient. Your businesses are opening and closing all the time. You're not able, as I mentioned already, charge them as much. There's a lot of data that you have to upkeep. And so by adding the property business improvement district, you're able to increase your budget and provide for services that you just can't afford when you're just a business improvement district. We've seen people be extremely successful in this. We've also seen people obviously fail, but I think, as Amanda just said, and I touched on in my presentation, it is just really important that you have that property owner support if you're going to go into it, and have one or two folks that will really spearhead it and be there, throughout the process. They don't have to do everything, but they need to be willing to kind of be a voice. If you have 2 or 3 of those folks that will be a voice and be willing to meet with people. Where we see it fail is that if it's not something that is the initiative of the owners association or the property owners, if it's being pushed from the city, we've seen that be really difficult for folks to kind of get people on board, because sometimes property owners will think, well, the city just wants this so that they can, basically pay less for services. So it's a delicate combination, but I think having that stakeholder support going into it really is what sets you up for success. Sorry, Gomaro, did you want to add in there?
Yeah, thank you, Carson. And so I think it's very important to say that a PBid is not going to sustain your organization. This is additional services that we have implemented. It's, there is a fee to manage this, but the fee is really irrelevant because it's just not going to happen the way you vision. if you're looking for this assessment to be a way as a way to sustain your organization, that's not a good way to look at it, because majority of that funding will have to go through that management district plan that Carson talked about. And that is up to the stakeholders of what they want to do. And luckily, MainStreet here in Oceanside, we have tried or attempted twice, but not gone through the full process because the sentiment wasn't right from a lot of our stakeholders at the time. However, we have seen an influx of property changes of hands. And so we have kept in touch with a lot of them, and the majority of them were really in favor of implementing an assessment district. So when Carson mentions about engage with your stakeholders now, if you're thinking about this, you need to start engaging probably a year before you start implementing this. And the city was a huge beneficial for our district. They helped us. MainStreet covered 50% of the funding, and the county also helped us with some funding, and the city helped us with some funding. So it was a great partnership and a collaborative way to start a service that will hopefully continue after the 5-year period. Remember, the first segment of this, or the first implementation, is a 5-year period, and then you can renew up to 10 years. So those are all little details that you need to understand before you jump into a PBid, because it can be a lot to take on at first. Luckily, we had COVID that helped us slow down the process. So that's something that we did notice, though, that it's a huge undertaking.
Right. Thank you. If I could just jump in super quick, just a little follow up with our situation. And then obviously this has been fantastic. I was one of the people who asked for this topic to be covered. So thank you all. I think in our area, our district, what we were looking for is not for it to sustain us, but I seem to be doing quite a bit of work on behalf of the city right now for no pay. I'm working on homeless issues, safe and clean issues, graffiti removal, I mean, you name it. And sometimes I'm spending up to 4 hours a day when I could be doing something to enhance the farmers market, enhance our events, create a new event, whatever it might be. So we thought if we're going to be doing this anyhow, we might as well be compensated for it. I do think the city will help us with those fees, those initial fees, certainly, because they're pushing for this. I originally was considering a bid, thinking it would engage us more business to business. But you said, Gumaro, with property owners, ours in our district are a lot of new property owners are buying up businesses and property that have been in trusts and families for decades. So we have a lot of new blood, brand new property owners that we've never even met, compared to ones who've been in the village for 30, 40 years. So this is a very pivotal time for us. So we're just starting. So thank you. This is very helpful.
Great. One thing that Gumaro touched on, I just wanted to circle back with. I think definitely, Christine, if you have city support, and Gumaro, you had fantastic city support as well. And I know Richmond did also, that is super important. So not to overlook that. But you mentioned funding for the project, Gumaro. And one thing I wanted to mention to everyone is that funding can actually be paid back with the assessments once the district is formed. And so I don't know if everyone knows that, but there's obviously some chance you take if you don't actually complete the process, but you are able to maybe get funding from stakeholders. We've seen that quite a few times. We've seen people get funding from the city. So there are some resources out there, and sometimes the city will just give you a certain amount for a feasibility study. So that gives you the ability to maybe just start the first phase and to see if this is really something that's going to work for you. So Christine, when you have that conversation with your city, you should definitely bring that up if they're willing to, pony up and help you out with the initial phase.
Thank you for that.
There's a question from Isaac in the chat that I feel kind of relates to one of the questions that was presented by a participant during registration, Shoshana, where they're speaking about, I'm wondering, Carson, if you might be able to provide any sort of insight into situations where there might be an existing Main Street program in one part of town, and there's a business or special improvement district in another part of town, and where there might be potential or opportunity for those two operations to merge or to join into partnership. Are you able to speak on that topic at all?
You know, I know that we see partnerships. I don't know if I've actually seen them merge together. I've seen different assessment groups, you know, so like in Sacramento, we have a tourism assessment district. We have we have 18 property business improvement districts, and then we have, you know, 3 restaurant improvement districts. And so they all work together. I haven't actually seen any of them merge. A lot of times when they are, as I mentioned in my presentation, there's one owners association and they kind of have their own little kingdom. But I haven't actually seen people come together after they're formed as much. But that's not impossible. It's definitely not impossible.
Great. Another question was in regards to assessment rates. Is there any general rule of thumb about, what the average assessment rate is, or is it really case by case?
It is really case by case. I would always say start off simple when you're starting to look at your assessment formula, and then add in variables as you're determining what the benefit's going to be for those different parcels. So, sometimes nonprofits have a different rate. Sometimes you'll want to charge a frontage because they're going to get more services on a main street. So I would say start off simple and then then add variables as you need to show the benefit, because as we all know, we have to show if you're paying more, we have to show that you're getting more benefit. If you're paying less, you have to make sure that you show that you're getting less benefit. I would say that, if you're just looking at a typical square footage, parcel square footage model, anything, and again, it depends on what services your property owners want, but you're kind of weighing a delicate balance. So how much they're willing to pay and the services they want, they don't always match. So what we usually do when we come in and help folks is that we try to do a small budget, a medium budget, and a large budget, and then have what the assessments would look like for everyone within that within those 3 categories. And then that's kind of helpful in your initial property owner conversations to say, okay, these are the services we think we can provide at level 1. These are the services we think we can provide at level 2. And these are the services we can provide at level 3. And at all 3, this is how much you would pay. What do you think? And so that's why I think early stakeholder engagement is what we've all touched on is important so that you can make some of those decisions.
And my last question that I'll offer up is kind of an amalgam of a couple of questions that people ask, but I think they're all kind of interrelated. So for Main Street organizations or communities that are interested in establishing a special improvement district, what would be the first couple of steps? And in particular, at this specific point in time where some communities are still being drastically affected by the pandemic or the economic impacts of the pandemic, what would be their first steps or things that they would need to consider to look into forming a special improvement district, especially right now?
I think the first step would be talking to your board, educating them what a district is and what it can mean for them, kind of getting some initial feedback from your board of directors, I think is always helpful. And then determining if you have a few of those lead stakeholders that would be interested in helping you with the process. Definitely, like I mentioned to Christine, you can do what we call a feasibility study. So where you can bring in a consultant to help you kind of, do a survey, start talking to property owners, start talking, educating your board on what the process is. and then also kind of talking about what services are. So I think it's kind of having a vision yourself. The owners association needs to have a vision first so that they can then sell that to their stakeholders and let them know, hey, this is what we think we can do for you if we had this extra budget. So that's the starting point. And then it's kind of then starting to reach out and making sure that you start getting consensus from other owners as well.
Hey, Carson, can I add, our downtown property business improvement district started through the Economic Vitality Committee. And a few years back, we had a consultant come to our MainStreet office to talk about economic development and this is recruitment and retention. And one of her analysis, and it's going to be like the feasibility study behind this goal setting. And one of their finding was that downtown Oceanside needs a clean and safe program. And so that was one of the goals that was kind of set forth. This was about 5 years ago or so. And I give her a shout out to Hillary Greenberg from North Carolina that came out and assessed our district. And so this is, we mentioned earlier about consultants. This is a really pivotal point of success for downtowns if you guys want to look at this. And I think it's important to bring in the right consultant to be able to demonstrate that this is what's needed in this community. So yeah, thank you. I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thank you, Gomara.
And I'll just add that, yeah, if your city is really behind it and wants to do it, generally you can work with them to do the feasibility study. That was something that we did do before we started our district. And it can be a good, model for the clean and safe, as well as for marketing and other, plans that you want for your district. And those things would be worked out when you do your management district plan. So it is a really good model for some struggling main streets, which ours was. Of course, it wasn't all of our funding, but it is a good source of funding and can bring the community and property owners together, which is something that we were able to do through our PBid. So it's a good model to use.
Yeah, and lastly, I would just add, something that Richmond Main Street did was we would visit other communities that had various types of special improvement districts and did, site visits and walkarounds and spoke with the staff of the organizations that, were tasked with managing the districts to really get a good sense of how theirs operated, how they aligned with their mission and their work plans and what their process was like, things that worked really well, things that maybe were learning experiences. That was one of the ways that we went about figuring out the right type of model for our special improvement district and making that as part of our decision-making process. And of course, engaging with folks who are experts in the field to get that support is absolutely crucial. There's a lot of nuances and specific things that are required in order to move through the process, and having someone who's an expert in those in that arena is a huge game changer and part of the process as well. And so with that, I want to thank Carson so much for her time and her expertise and her input today. I think it was really exciting to learn about the history of special improvement districts, as well as the innovations for the various different kinds to kind of meet the various industries that are emerging, as well as, visitor and resident community engagement strategies that are starting to emerge as well. So it'll be very exciting to see how these new districts perform and how we're able to glean kind of best practices from them and see how other communities might be able to utilize those tools as well. So thank you so much, Carson.